لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. نوينا التعلم وتعليم وتذكر وتذكير والنفع والانتفاع والفرد والاستفادة والحث على التمسك بكتاب الله وسنة رسوله صلى الله عليه وآله وصحبه وسلم، ودعاء إلى الهدى ودلالة على الخير ابتغاء وجه الله ومرضاته وقربه وثوابه سبحانه وتعالى، مع لطف وعافية برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنا نسألك علما لدني ومشرب صافي الهاني يا وهاب يا غني. اللهم إنا نسألك علما لدني والمشرب صافي الهاني يا وهاب يا غني. اللهم إنا نسألك علما لدني والمشرب الصافي الهاني يا وهاب يا غني. اللهم صل وسلم على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم ألهمنا علما نفقه به أوامرك ونواهيك، وارزقنا فهما نعرف به كيف نناجيك يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم إنا نسألك فهم النبيين وحفظ المرسلين وإلهام الملائكة المقربين في عافية يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم أغننا بالعلم وزينا بالحلم وأكرمنا بالتقوى وجملنا بالعافية يا أرحم الراحمين، آمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم إنا نستودعك ما قرأناه وما نقرأه في هذا المجلس وما قبله وما بعده، فاحفظه علينا حتى ترده إلينا وقت احتياجنا إليه يا أرحم الراحمين. اللهم أكرمنا بنور الفهم وأخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم، وافتح لنا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا حكمتك يا أرحم الراحمين، آمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. اللهم يا من مقاليد الأمور كلها بيده وإليه يرجع الأمر كله، يا فتاح يا عليم، يا فتاح يا عليم، يا فتاح يا عليم، افتح علينا فتحا قريبا. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي، وسدد لساني واهدي قلبي، وافعل كذلك بأحبابي أبدا، وارزقنا كمال فتوح العارفين والفقه في الدين مع الكمال إخلاص الصدق واليقين والعافية والغنى والنصر والحفظ والنفع والانتفاع والخيرات الدارين وعلوم الأولين والآخرين، آمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم، والحمد لله رب العالمين. Amin, 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 ya Rabbal Alamin. Alhamdulillah. Okay, Alhamdulillah. Today we are on Thursday, mashallah, and we are doing our class on the Quran. Right. So we're still going to the hadith on the benefits and the fadail, like the merits of being people of the Quran. Right? And there is nothing higher than being, the people of the Quran, because the people of the Quran, they are the elects of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, and in striving, inshallah, to be counted as Ahlul Quran and the people of the Quran, I will begin by first loving the Quran. I believe in the Quran. Of course, we believe in the Quran. It's part of our Rukun Iman to believe in all the revealed books, especially the very last book that was sent down to our beloved Prophet, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the Quran. Right? So we believe in the Quran. That is the first right of the Quran. And of course, you love the Quran. Right? So you love the Quran. You love hearing it being recited. You love reciting it. Right? You love just seeing it, just seeing the Quran. Right? You love hearing about it. You love hearing the stories in it. Like you love everything about it. And it's called love, right? And you love something, you love everything about it. You love everything about it, right? So love the Quran, right? Love the Quran, honor the Quran, exalt the Quran, right? So place the Quran, on a high shelf. I place the Quran, ensure that where you put the Quran, that you have your full honor of your interactions with this Quran, right? And then, of course, recite the Quran, right? Recite the Quran, to the have your portion every day, right? Every day without fail, have your portion, right, of Quran recitation, right? On days where you're on your menses and you cannot recite, right? Then have at least, don't replace the time, with anything else, right? But listen, like listen to the Quran. So if you can't recite it, you can still listen, okay, if you're on your menses, you can still listen to the Quran. I so have a portion, of the day where you're listening, just listening to the Quran. And you can actually follow with your eyes, because now we have all kinds of gadgets, right? We have our devices that you can literally, like you can actually just on your computer or on your iPad. You can just go on any YouTube, uh go on to YouTube. There's so many recitations or reciters, on YouTube, and they do everything for you already. You just have to search what surah you want, right? And the surah comes up and you play it, and the ayat will flow as the Quran, as the surah is being recited, right? Now it's so easy, Allah. It's so easy. So I was mentioning that earlier in some of the classes, we are in the zaman of no excuse. We really are in the zaman of no excuse, but we have a billion excuses. But we actually were in the zaman of zero excuse. Okay, you have no excuse. We are in fact even in a zaman, right, whereby the day one of my students here were showing me that they are not, in the past when I was studying Arabic, and like, just beginning, and we carry like a very heavy dictionary around to search for words here and there. Now she's showing me that you can just have an app and you can just like on the camera over whatever text you're looking at, and then all the words pop up in English. I didn't know this thing existed. Now I know. You can just do that now. Like subhanallah, we have like no we're in the zaman that has really, we don't really have to do anything. It's just all there. Yeah. Right, so anyway, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. So like so if you have your time for Quran every day, like to ensure you have your time for Quran every day, that you recite an amount and that you are listening. All right. So if you can't recite, then have yourself listen, right, to an amount of Quran. So you don't miss your portion, right, of Quran, even if you're on your menses, right? You don't miss your portion, right? But instead of reciting, you listen. You listen, to the verses being recited. And then of course, if you can memorize. Today we're going through some hadith, on the memorization of the Quran, right? And then now, of course, what is important for us about the Quran is to apply the Quran, right? So to live by the Quran, right? Because the Quran is sent as a book. It's a book of guidance, right, to all of mankind. It's a book of guidance to the muttaqun, and specifically, right, to those with taqwa, right? So the Quran, so it is, it would defeat the purpose of the Quran if people were not acting on the Quran. Of course, the laws of the Quran, right? You have to go back to the scholars, and it is the way of the scholars, right, that you have to, Allah has made it such that his book is only accessible. I mean, the meanings of his book is only accessible through teachers. That's the way Allah has made it, right? Allah has made it such that, and Allah can do whatever He wants, right? Somebody were to argue and say, how come the Quran is not, like just self-sufficient, whereby I don't have to go to a teacher, right, to figure out the Quran, or to understand the Quran. Why didn't Allah just, like, if it's a book from God, shouldn't it be, perfect or complete, in that I can just open it and then just read it, or just read the translation and then just understand it by myself. Like why must I have to go through a teacher? If somebody would ask that question, and yesterday my brother was telling me, my brother sent me this video, this clip from Sheikh Hamza Yusuf, and he was mentioning the same question. Then he said a Singaporean asked him, it was a Singaporean woman, they all came to Singapore, and then she was helping out. Then she asked that question, like why is it that Allah's book that you need brother was like, is that you? Were you the one who asked that question? Then no, I know the answer. I know the answer. The question wasn't me. Was somebody else, like I guess, but Miss Shamsa Yusuf was saying that the Singaporean woman, during one of his trips to Singapore, that she asked that question, like why does the Quran require why does it require that you can't just figure it out by yourself? Why is it not independent of someone having to teach it to you? Why is it not self-understood? There was the question. Why is it not self-understood? If it's a book of God, okay, and this is the human understanding, okay? Human understanding. And the human understanding is that, in a judgment from the human being, and this is a very important question again. I want to address it, okay? Because I do hear it from people who I've seen it, from people who have left Islam, murtad, right? They have left Islam and they blame this part of Islam and they use their own human logic or lack of logic, right? Trying to prove that okay, the Quran is the book of God, right? Subhanahu wa Taala. Right. I also get this question, from youngsters, right? From teenagers, from youngsters, right? So yes, you must know the answer. You must know what is the answer, right? First and foremost, right? They, with their own human logic, okay, or lack of logic, right, but with their own human mind, right? They decide that it is from perfection. Okay, so it's human judgment. Okay, they decide for themselves. It is from human perfection is from the perfection of a divine book. They decide by themselves that this is a sharat, that this is a condition. Okay, they decide by themselves this has to be a condition. That for a book to be perfect, right, that it should be understood in and of itself without having a teacher to explain it. They decide that in themselves. Okay, and they said that so if this book is really from God, right, Subhanahu wa Taala. Therefore, right, this book should be accessible, right? Then, and understood in and of itself. You get my discussion right now. You get it. MashaAllah. Actually, I prepared different lessons for today, but I think somebody here has that question in their head. So Allah's making me talk about this. I actually prepared a different question already. I prepared a different lesson for today. The lessons of from the hadith lah. But I think we must go through this question. Right. So right, so they basically they judge in that way. They judge in that way. Right, from the perfection of a book is that it is understood in and of itself without a teacher. Okay. So what's the response? The response is that first and foremost, right, that's your judgment of what is the perfection of a book, right? Your judgment. It's not something that is factual. It's not something that is you say that is completely that you say is absolutely correct. That means it is truth. It is in its in its nature. No, it's an opinion. So first and foremost, understand that statement is an opinion, not fact. Right? The proofs that a book is the book of God, right? Subhanahu wa Taala, and the book that is revealed from Allah Subhanahu wa Taala is the contents of the book, right? So what the book speaks about, especially matters that nobody knows about except God Himself. Okay, the Quran is filled with this. Okay, the Quran is filled with matters that nobody knows about except the Creator Himself. Right? The Quran is filled with that, and the Quran challenges human beings over and over again to come with the likes of the Quran, right? And it has never been done from the time of Rasulullah to our zaman. So these are the main proofs, right, of the Quran, right? There are matters in the Quran, information in the Quran, whereby nobody would know this stuff, these things, stories of people of the past, as well as, and in fact, the very, the details in the stories of the people of the past that nobody would know about except the Creator Himself. And nobody would know about, like, for example, the story in Surah Kahfi. Like, who would have known that the sleepers in the cave, they were flipping their bodies left and right? Who would have known that? Right? Nobody knew the people in the cave and how they were sleeping. No one knew that, right? And who knew the private du'as of Nabi Zakaria, right? In Surah Maryam, when Allah describes him making a silent dua, a pleading to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Like, who could know this, like the inner workings of the human being, right? What is secret inside their hearts? Who can speak about all these matters, right? SubhanAllah. And the Quran speaks about it a lot. Like, Allah exposes the heart of human beings of the past. Allah shows us what they are thinking about, what was going through their minds, like who would know all these things, right? So when it was narrated by someone who saw these things happen, you can't tell what's going on in people, right? And of course, Allah speaks about matters, of science. Allah speaks about the creation of man. Allah speaks about the movements of the earth. Allah speaks about, the mountains. Allah speaks about, even in the oceans. There's a story of a person, a person, who used to go and sail in the sea, of course, in the sea, lah, sail where, right? But he used to go sailing. He used to have like a ship, and they would go, on voyages. And this person came across the Quran and recited the Quran. He read the Quran, and he said, and he came across the verses, of the ocean, as how Allah describes the huge waves in the ocean, and the storms of the ocean. If okay, I think most of us here, we're not sailors, probably, right? But I have seen those videos on YouTube. There's like storms. Okay, now, why have I seen these videos? It's interesting because of the ayat in the Quran, right? But you search it. So I would say search because it shows Allah's nature, Allah's creation, and it shows nature, and it shows Allah's creation. So I searched, storms at sea. Oh, it like storms at sea is really, you know, it's amazing. Storms at sea. It's really amazing how the waves are literally like mountains. And it's so scary. You will see it's so the sea is the ocean is terrifying. It's beautiful and terrifying. I'm terrified of the ocean. Right, but it is terrifying. Like, so anyway, this is sailor, sidetrack, right? With this sailor, he saw all these, verses. He recited these verses about describing very accurately the storms at sea, right? That nobody would know about unless you were actually there to watch. And now we have YouTube, we know about it as well. Like, you can watch it, you can watch how tremendous the storms at sea are, right? So the person was like, this Muhammad must be a sailor, this Muhammad must have been a sailor, right? He described exactly what we see in the storms at sea. And then he was told, no, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he lived in the deserts, far from the sea. And in fact, there are no records of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ever being at sea. Right. There are no records. Yes, maybe, when he did his hijrah, he walked by the shore, right, because they took a different route, right, from Mecca to Medina. So they went by the shore near Jeddah, that area. So maybe he did go by the shore and did see the sea, right, the oceans. Right? But are there any records of him actually being on a boat, and actually going out to sea? No, there are no records, of Rasulullah actually doing that. Like, he was someone on land all the time, right? The Sahaba, they traveled to Abyssinia, they went across the sea, and that there were of the Sahaba that did not like being at sea at all, because they were people of the deserts. They didn't like there not being land beneath them, right? So they're not used to it. So when this sailor learned that Rasulullah was a man of a desert, he lived in the desert all his life, never gone out to sea, and much less seen, a storm at sea. Right? He came into Islam. He came into Islam straight away. He's like, no one knows this stuff except for us sailors. No one has seen the raging waters, of storms at sea. And if you want to understand what he's talking about, really go and Google storms at sea, and you will see I hope what pops up are storms lah, not like some movie that's called Storms at Sea or whatever. Right, but basically, like you will see like real like videos of such monstrous waves, huge waves. Yeah, I was so mixed up when I saw the videos because when I heard the story, I was like, what's so unique about Storms at Sea? Then I searched it. And I was like, wow, mashallah. It does show, you get humble. I mean, if you were there and you're watching this, right? Oh, you'd be so humble. Right? Because the like the as massive as the ship is, and nowadays we adapt, in our zaman with technology, the ships are massive, right? It's still like a speck. It looks like a speck, like compared to the oceans, the waves of the oceans, subhanallah. Like, and then you imagine, you think, how was it for Nabi Yunus, ya Allah, to be thrown off a ship in the middle of an ocean that's raging like that, because there was a storm that happened, right? And they had to throw off someone because they believed that, when they throw off someone, the sea wants someone, right? So when they throw off someone, then the storm will get lesser or will be subdued, right? So that was why they ended up throwing off Nabi Yunus alayhi salam, because they were throwing lots and they were seeing who had to be thrown off, right? The boat for the storm to come down, right? So can you imagine the kind of, like, if you all see the video later on lah, right? The video of storms at sea. Can you imagine being thrown off into the waters in that state, right? Of raging, of a raging storm. Oh yeah, Allah. Can I imagine, right? Being thrown into the depths of the ocean. Oh, that would be so scary, ya Allah. So anyway, going back to the proofs of the book, right, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So these are proofs that the book is from God, right? The statement that a book from God should be self-explanatory, right? And it should explain itself. You don't need a teacher. That statement is not a proof of God. That statement is not a proof of the book of God. It's not. It is not. Right? Why? Because from the will of God, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Allah has will, right? Allah has irada. Allah has will. He can will however He wants that His book be transmitted and be understood, right? He can will it. If Allah wants that His book be self-explanatory, He can very well do so if He wants. And if Allah wants that His book can only be assessed through teachers, if you want access to Allah's book, you need a teacher. He can choose that as well. It's His will. So you're talking about the irada of Allah. It's not something that is wajib, that is wajib aqli. In aqidah, right? There are things that are like logically, it has to be. It has to be, and there are no two ways around it. For example, there has to be one God, right? No two ways around this. There cannot be more than one God, right? Cannot be, not logical for there to be more than one God, right? Logically speaking, there can only be one God, right? But when it comes to the Quran, is it logically speaking that the book of God must definitely be self-explanatory? Is that a logical reasoning? No, it's an opinion. It's not that it has to be that way. So if Allah wanted to, He could have, given His book and it will be self-explanatory. Anybody who reads it knows it by themselves. No, Allah does not want that. Allah wants that you must be linked to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to understand His book. You must be linked to the Prophet. He is not allowing anyone to come into the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala just like that. No, you're not allowed to. Right? You want to come to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you gotta have your teachers. And your teachers must have teachers who have teachers that link all the way back to the one unto whom the book was revealed. And that's the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you see, Allah has chosen this way. That's what He has chosen. He has chosen it to be this way, right? So so this is basically is something you say that is jaiz fi haqqillah. You learn some aqidah, right? So in aqidah, something that is jaiz, something that is permissible. Right? Something that is possible in the right of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can Allah possibly make his book, self-explanatory? Yes, he wants to. Can Allah, make his book such that nobody can access it except through a teacher? Yes, he can if he wants to. And no one can blame Allah for doing that. If Allah wants to do that, he can very well do so. Right? And can you say, oh, but if you need a teacher, then it makes the book less perfect. Who says so? I would say it's more perfect. Right? You can argue the other way. No, with a teacher that you need a teacher, the book becomes more perfect. Why? Right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first and foremost shows us that his religion has two sources. The book of Allah and the prophets. You cannot ignore the other source. You can't just say, "Oh, I only want the book of Allah. I don't want anything else." They call the Quraniyun, that I mentioned about them. And then Habib will say they're la Quraniyun, la Quraniyun. They are not Quraniyun. They call themselves the Quranists. The Quranists. Anyone who rejects the words of the Prophet ﷺ, they are the furthest from the Quran. Because Allah has made it that way. They are the furthest from the Quran. They don't understand the Quran. Those who reject the words of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because you are rejecting the very lens by which Allah has made it compulsory for us to look through to understand the Quran, the lens of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Allah has done that for us. Allah has made it the rule. That's the rule that Allah has chosen. That's the rule. You cannot disagree with this. Right? And in fact, I would say that, see, subhanallah, any book, right, that is all encompassing. And there's a book that doesn't exist except for the Quran, lah, right? But, but if let's say you have a book, right, that has a lot of matters spoken about in it, right? These books, you need teachers. Because how can you encompass every single thing in a book and all that it encompasses is written out? You're gonna have like what, like a billion-page book or something, like even almost a billion is enough. You have a huge book that nobody can carry around, right? And nobody can memorize. You get me? The Quran is a book that covers every aspect of human existence. It covers every aspect of human existence. If you want the Quran to be self-explanatory, you want a what? A billion-page book, is it? Huh? Hey. So it's more towards it is perfection that Allah mentions a few lines. Then you have your teacher who explains it to you. Isn't that from perfection? Yes, it is. It's from perfection, right? That you have a few simple lines, right? You have a few surahs, short surahs, your Surah Ikhlas, 4 ayat. In there, every matter of aqidah that you needed to know about, right? In Surah Ikhlas, 4 ayat, right? So I would say it's from divine genius, isn't it? It's from divine genius, it's from divine perfection that the Quran is concise and all-encompassing, right? So how to be concise and all-encompassing at the same time when there is a teacher to explain the concise verses, right? If the Quran's going to explain every single thing, you're going to have like a huge book carrying around, right? And you can't memorize it. Okay, you can't memorize. You can do a khatam also. Okay, you take your entire life to khatam it. You see, just learning Quran, you probably we will die first before we finish studying, the tafsir of the Quran. If you want to cover the tafsir of the entire Quran from cover to cover, tafsir, meaning the meanings of the verses of the Quran from cover to cover, right? I had a class once in my family. I had my auntie, my mom's cousin, and then her children. I had class some time ago, and they asked me to go to the Quran with them. So I said, okay, fine. And I said, how, like, do you want deep tafsir or you want like superficial tafsir? Then they said, okay, superficial. We do it one time round first, and they thought we do a second time round that is deeper. Okay, okay. And so the superficial, Surah Baqarah tafsir. So I began doing that, and like literally every lesson, like it would take like one or two verses, one or two verses. So my auntie, she flipped to the back of Surah Baqarah, and she was like, how many verses are there in Surah Baqarah? She saw. And she's like, if you are doing like what, two verses per week, And then we're going to divide this by a number of ayat. How many ayat in the Quran? More than 6,000. Okay, if you're going to do 2 verses a week, we need about 3,000 weeks, right? And 3,000 weeks divided by 54 weeks per year. How many years are that? Is that how? When will I finish the Quran? And that's the fact of the matter. Just by going through the tafsir of the Quran, you will die first. I'll tell you that. You will die first. Right? And this basically is superficial tafsir. If you want to go into deep tafsir, right? You will not go. I won't see you go past Surah Baqarah. Like you might, anybody in your 60s, your 70s, your 80s, we might be here together in this class till we die, till I die. Subhanallah, and we won't hit even half the Quran maybe. We won't, right? Habib's Monday class, he began, years ago. And that one is official tafsir. Right? He's doing like, for the masses. He's going fast. Right? He began years ago. I think like 20, 30 years ago, he began this tafsir class. Right now, he's hitting the middle of the Quran. He actually hit the middle of the Quran right now. Right? And Habib is already in his 60s. May Allah lengthen his life and give him long life. Right? But if he took 30 years to hit half the Quran, it's 3 more years, okay, to finish the entire Quran. And it is basically not even, in-depth tafsir. It's not, right? So can you imagine if the Quran was to be self-explanatory, how long this Quran would be, right? And would anybody khatam the Quran? Would anybody be able to khatam or even memorize the Quran? It's going to be so long, right? So anyway, it's from perfection, right? That is concise speech that has oceans of meaning in the endless meaning. And of course, the Quran is the book of God, subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So necessarily the book of God is infinite. The meanings in the book of God is infinite, right? Necessarily because it is from the knowledge of God, from the speech of God, right? So how can that be, in a sense, self-explanatory, right? You can't encompass all that, right, in words in front of you. Okay, I mean to be spelled out everything in front of you. It can't. It's gonna be billions and billions of pages. As Allah said, if the meanings of this Quran, and Allah Himself answers the question, mashallah, in Surah Kafi, right? Allah Himself answers the question of people who say, why is the Quran not self-explanatory? Why? Right? Allah Himself in Surah Kafi explains it. Last part of Surah Kafi, if the meanings of your Lord, the meanings of the words of your Lord were to be written, right, by the seas as ink. It means if you have ink, the amount of the oceans of the world, right? It was to be written, by the seas, of the world as ink, right? It would not suffice the meanings in the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if you double up the oceans. Allah tells us that if you really want to explain, you really want to expand, right, the knowledge in the Quran and write it all out, the entire oceans of the world, the earth today that we know, turn into ink, use up all that ink times 2, still not enough. Still not enough to write down the meanings in the Quran, right? So, that's the answer to the question. Right? Why can't it be self-explanatory? Because it contains more than 2 oceans of meaning, right? The meanings in the Quran there's no end to it. And that you say is a mu'jizat, is from the miracles and the proofs of God, subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself, is the proofs of God, right? That this is Allah's word, right? Because the Quran will address matters till the end of time. It will address matters till the end of time without limits. Therefore, the words cannot be self-explanatory. No, it has to be interpreted by the people of the Zaman who have authority to do so, and they have authority by taking from a chain of transmission all the way back to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and that's the way Allah has done it. Right, mashallah. Okay, anyway, we didn't do any of the hadith that I wanted to do today. So alhamdulillah, whatever Allah wanted us, okay, whatever Allah wanted us to learn, inshallah. Um, uh, basically, if you're going to learn for tafsirs from YouTube, ensure that the teachers who are teaching it are credible. All right. So usually, if I'm going to take from any tafsir, online, I will do a background check on the teacher. Where did they study? What's their background? Because not only do we say about chain of transmission, but also ideology, right? Because the Quran can, if someone does not have a chain of transmission, they can take the Quran and they can mess with it, and they can give their own ideology. Right? There is a particular like for example, Muhammad Asad. Muhammad Asad, he has a Jewish background, came into Islam. He has his own tafsir, but he can't accept miracles. He has a problem with miracles. So he tends to interpret verses that speak about prophetic miracles in a rhetorical manner. That's not correct. Flat out, that is not correct, right? Miracles happen, they happen. Allah's not confined by the laws of nature, right? So see that there are tafsirs like that. There are tafsirs like that. They cannot accept the miracles of prophets. So they will interpret the miracles, of 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 prophets in a rhetorical manner, saying that no, what was meant was that, this was a dream in their heart. They don't want to take a literal meaning to what happened with the prophets. Get me? Right? That's dangerous. If you take a tafsir from the Shia tradition, right, they will interpret everything in favor of Sayyidina Ali, right? It's all in the favor of Sayyidina Ali, right? Um, I am studying it right now. How they do. There are of those who take Quranic verses and they will interpret, just to push their agenda. So you need to know the background of whoever you're taking from, right? What is their background? What is their ideology? And what is their training? Right? Where did they study from? Usually, from where they study from, you can tell what is their background. Usually, so you need to know if they are credible, right? Alhamdulillah. Okay, I want to go to Fatima Zahra. Okay, you're gonna talk about the Quran, mashallah. Okay,